All right. Well, we are a few minutes after 8, so let's get this webinar started. First of all, thank you to everyone who have registered. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss the Athletes Anti-Doping Ombuds. Just a few words from me. So again, thank you so much for joining. We're here today to discuss the Athletes Anti-Doping Ombuds program. My name is Karine, and I'm responsible with my colleague Stacy for the Athlete Engagement Unit at WADA. Our mission in athlete engagement is to work with you, the athletes, the anti-doping community at large, as well as all of WADA's departments, to develop better or new programs, tools, and services for athletes. And the Ombuds is really just one example. And while the Athletes Anti-Doping Ombuds is supported by WADA, it is totally operationally independent of WADA. And I'll let Anna tell you certainly more about that today. But before we get started, I just wanted to inform you that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on WADA's YouTube channel afterward. The video recording will be edited to remove or blur any participant names and faces. The webinar today is scheduled for an hour, and I'm extremely pleased to have two guest speakers with us. Gabby, the Vice Chair of WADA's Athlete Council. Gabby will share a few introductory remarks with you today. And of course, Anna, our Athletes Anti-Doping Ombuds, who's here to discuss the Athletes Anti-Doping Ombuds program. The presentation component of this webinar today should be approximately 30 to 40 minutes, after which we'll invite your questions and comments. So we want to make sure we have sufficient time for your questions and comments. So we should have at least 20 minutes for that. And we'll ask you at the end to either raise your virtual hand or write in the chat if you feel more comfortable writing, and we'll monitor that at the end. So again, I really want to thank you for joining, and it's really my pleasure to give the virtual floor to Gabby. Gabby, over to you.
Thank you so much, Karine. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Gabi Arends. I'm a retired athlete from Namibia. I competed at 3 Olympic Games. I'm a Commonwealth Games medalist and a multiple African champion in the sport of trap shooting. Since my retirement from competitive sport in 2016, I feel a sense of responsibility to plow back into sport by serving on sports organizations, delivering the athlete's perspective with the objective of paving the way for others. I truly believe that by listening to athletes, sports organizations can ensure that all efforts are guided by their experiences, knowledge, and perspectives, which will make any sports organization better. Currently, I serve as the chair of the Anoka Continental Athletes Commission in Africa, and I'm the vice chair of the WADA Athlete Council. I became involved with WADA because I'm passionate about promoting a level and fair playing field. More specifically, I felt it is important to deliver the athlete's perspective of athletes who come from countries with no or very little support or resources available. And very often, just the access to information to athlete and competition-related matters are very hard to come by. And by giving my perspective, I can assist a global organization like WADA, which aims to uphold the integrity and fairness of sport, will assist in finding ways to shape a better future for athletes in regards to anti-doping matters. Athletes have the right to information and to be empowered with tools to enable them to make informed decisions. From an athlete perspective, I am happy to know that the Ombuds program is available. Anti-doping can be confusing and complicated, and the Ombuds program provides a useful and needed service to any athlete worldwide looking for information or guidance around anti-doping. I'm very proud to say that the Ombuds program is an athlete-led initiative and is a significant step forward for athletes. This is a way the Athlete Council empowered athletes and promotes fairness in anti-doping and ensures that athletes' rights and their access to information are supported. As a member of the WADA Athlete Council, it is my priority to promote this valuable resource and to make sure athletes know it exists by working with the sports movement and the network of national anti-doping organizations to ensure everybody knows about it in the athlete community. I'm very happy to introduce today Anna Thorstensen, who is the first athlete anti-doping ombuds. Anna will tell you more about the role of the Ombuds, as well as the role it plays to support athletes in navigating the complex anti-doping landscape. And with that, welcome, Anna, and the floor is over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabby, for that very kind introduction. My name is Anna Thorstensen. I am Swedish by nationality. I am a lawyer by profession, but I live in Switzerland, so it's very confusing for everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here today. So I say good morning, good day, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. I can see there are a lot of people online, and it's amazing to see this uptake at the start of this presentation. I will now share my screen. Gabby, would you mind stop sharing yours? There we go. Just double checking, can you see the screen now? Perfect.
Not yet, Anna.
Not yet, okay.
Not yet. If not, I am happy to assist and share it via my screen, and you can let me know when you want me to advance.
I still have Gabby's vision. See now? Now?
Yes, so you can put it in presenter mode, and then it's gonna be
okay. Sorry for
the
that.
full screen.
Technical issues. It's not my strongest part, obviously. So, Athletes Anti-Doping Ombuds, that's the name of this this role that I am having at the moment. Just to give a little bit of more background in relation to why I am here and why I was very interested in this role. So throughout my work experience, I have been working in the anti-doping sphere since 2009. So that's a long time. I'm currently also having a job as a legal counsel for the International Equestrian Federation. And in this role, I've been working with all levels of the anti-doping community. And previously as well, I've been seeing all the different angles of the anti-doping community. I've been seeing the problems the athletes might have and the problems the National Anti-Doping Organization or international federations might have. And I have managed cases before sporting tribunals, and including the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is the High Court for Sport. I am a sport lover, of course. I competed in freeride skiing and equestrian jumping, but I'm practicing many more. So throughout this experience, I realized there is a massive gap between the athletes and the anti-doping organizations. And this role is intended to fill that gap and be more accessible for the athletes. So just a short overview of the presentation. I will go through this list here throughout the presentation: background, what is an ombuds, who is the ombuds for, do's and don'ts, questions received by the ombuds so far, and how can athletes reach out. What is the process when the athletes reach out? And also, since we have some national anti-doping organizations participating here, I would like to suggest something how the NADOs can support this very important program. And then I hope we have a lot of questions and can have a great discussion by the end of this seminar. Background. Gabby already mentioned a bit about this background, but I wanted to mention that it is something that's raised by athletes. So it came about in relation to the Athletes Anti-Doping Rights Act, and it was put in place to start by the Athletes Committee. So the question at this point in time was, who is there to assure that athletes' rights are upheld, and where can
I'm really sorry to jump in. I think maybe you're changing the slides, but we can't see the slides changing. Just to let you know.
Why is that?
We can see it changing now, and I think maybe if you click at the bottom on the presenter, like the screen at the bottom, we'll see your whole screen.
Now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so now it's not in presenting mode, but that will do then. So where do athletes actually go when they feel they can't go to the anti-doping organization, and where can they get help? So obviously there is a very big need for an ombuds service, which can be mutually beneficial for both athletes, WADA, anti-doping organizations, and the anti-doping system at large. And in addition, as you might have noticed over the past years, WADA is seeking to become more athlete-centered, and that obviously requires means for athletes to feel that they can be heard by a neutral and well-informed organ. And maybe I should start with explaining what an ombuds is. I once did a presentation where someone said, great presentation, but what is an ombuds? And the word itself, ombudsman, obviously doesn't fit very well to me being a woman. So we choose to name it ombuds. And an ombudsperson is a neutral person from whom individuals can seek guidance and assistance with a specific concern to ensure that certain rights and interests are upheld. It is actually a Swedish word, and it's a very important word for this role, but it also, we are aware of that not many or not every person knows what an ombuds is. So it is important to understand that term. And for this specific role, it is in the rules and terms of reference for this role that it is an ombuds service that provides athletes with cost-free, neutral, impartial, fair advice and assistance in relation to the World Anti-Doping Program and all the entities that play a role within it. What is very important with an ombuds is that it has to operate under very important principles. The first one is confidentiality. Confidentiality means that you can contact the ombuds, and when you do so, you can rest assured that this information will not be shared to anyone unless you agree to do so. And then secondly, independence. The ombuds is not employed by anyone, not the anti-doping organization, not WADA, but sits as an independent operating organ to be completely independent from other anti-doping organizations. And also the third one, neutrality, which basically means that the ombuds is not necessarily taking any side. I'm not taking your side as athletes, but I'm not either taking the side of the anti-doping organizations. So this is just looking at facts of a situation and be neutral about it and then give the best advice. And also informality, which basically means that there is no legal binding advice or something that the ombuds can do that would have an impact in relation to a legal case. So I cannot give a sanction or change any legal binding documents. So the informality is also good to have as a principle, because you can be very naturally contacting this person and feel it's not legally binding in any way. So why ombuds then? Well, as we know, the anti-doping system is very complex, and as an athlete, it is important that you have free and confidential access to an independent and neutral source of information. It means that someone can answer your questions, help you better understand your rights and responsibilities, and also help you navigate the anti-doping system. And this is where the Athletes Anti-Doping Ombuds comes in. So the Ombuds is a free, neutral, and confidential resource for athletes that have questions or concerns about anti-doping issues, and gives the athlete a free space to seek information and get advice outside of the anti-doping organization, and also where they can be completely honest and not have any fear for retaliation. Who is the Ombuds for then? What would you say? Well, this is a global role, so the Ombuds is for any athlete subject to the World Anti-Doping Code and with any related anti-doping issues. So that can be basically anything about the World Anti-Doping Code or any other organization within this program. As you can imagine, this is a very big scope, and the role is important to, for the future, develop so everyone has access to these services. I normally like to summarize the role a bit with the pictures. You have pictures here which just stating a few important words: neutral, listening, no retaliation, trust, athlete's right, best practice. You can facilitate the procedure, you are independent and impartial. And frankly speaking, the Ombuds offer cost-free confidential independent advice to athletes. And I think here, cost-free is crucial. You can seek this legal advice to get a first insight on what your best options are if you have an anti-doping rule violation. The Ombuds would then give a recommendation on best practices from her background, what she believes is the best practice for your specific individual situation. The Ombuds is also there to listen and understand issues which might be very complex while remaining neutral. So the Ombuds will not put any value in you did anything right or wrong, but rather seeing the totality of circumstances and remaining neutral within that. So the Ombuds can assist with disputes and concerns as an advisory function. And it also inform and ensure athletes' rights and responsibilities. And in some cases, it's necessary to guide and direct and refer athletes to other parties or resources if the Ombuds cannot help. But most importantly, it is that the Ombuds is advocating for fair and transparent policies and processes within the anti-doping system. And also, the Ombuds is there to identify new issues, opportunities, and trends within anti-doping. So the aim for the Ombuds role is that issues will be resolved quicker, at reduced cost, and with increased satisfaction of all parties. Do's and don'ts. Before we go into that, I just wanted to highlight the key principles again. So obviously, independency and impartiality is key. The Ombuds office is an independent office. I'm not employed by WADA. I'm not reporting to WADA on a specific case. And I am neutral and impartial resource for you athletes. And it's also important to highlight that there is a clear process for any potential conflict of interest. Confidential and informal. So confidential information sharing is the aim of the Ombuds office. The Ombuds may disclose information only with the athlete's consent, so you can be safe from retaliation and feel really safe to come forward. You might have sensitive issues and topics that you want to discuss with the Ombuds, and you can rest assured that this is an informal proceeding within the Ombuds office, and yet your information is staying confidentially within that office. So what can the Ombuds actually do then for you athletes? Well, I can look into a matter and look at the circumstances, apply natural justice, and come to some kind of conclusion based on the facts of your situation. And it's all your specific situation, your individual situation. So I would focus on how the rules are applied and see if there is a good solution for your situation. So I would recommend best practices for athletes, and with that fulfill some kind of need from athletes for an independent advice and guidance. I can also provide you with information and direct and connect you to other existing Ombuds services, or might have a contact detail at the National Anti-Doping Organization where you can find more information? Sometimes the answer is actually out there, but there's so many different rules and resources that it's nice to have someone to guide you through that. But most of all, what I try to do is to try explaining the very complicated processes. What is expected from you as athletes? And what can be done in your situation? I give the basic advice regarding your rights in that particular situation, but also what your responsibilities are under the anti-doping rules. This is what the Ombuds can do. And what is the Ombuds not, and what can the Ombuds not do? It is not a place to report doping. We already have that through other means, such as Speak Up through the WADA, or national anti-doping organizations have their own Speak Up platform for national cases. So if I receive a report about doping, I will ask if it's okay to share that with the relevant body, or ask you to contact that relevant body directly. Neither is it an investigative resource. Sometimes I get a question, can you please help me investigate this situation? Unfortunately, there is no resources to do that, and it's not supposed to be an investigative resource. And as I mentioned already, the Ombuds has no formal or legal authority. So the Ombuds cannot render any adjudication, decision, or give any sanctions. And it's not legally binding. What I say is just a recommendation of what I believe is the best practice for your situation. And very often I get a question, could you be my lawyer in the proceedings? No. The Ombuds has to remain neutral, so there's no advocacy for any party. So I cannot represent athletes in legal proceedings. And last important notice is that the Ombuds office is not a notice for WADA. I'll give you an example now recently where we had the situation with the Chinese swimmers. I got a lot of emails that were actually directed to WADA, but asking WADA to reply and stand up for this situation. However, since the Ombuds is not on notice for WADA, I just had to refer all these people back to WADA. And this is because the Ombuds office is operating independently from WADA. It is financed by WADA at the moment, and we are looking into the future to see how we can finance this better and also assure more independence, and also assure that the operating independence for WADA remains. And please remember, the Ombuds office, it is entirely up to you if you want to use it. So the use of the Ombuds is entirely voluntary. There's no obligation to use such office. It's just a resource to try to help you out in this very complex set of rules. So what kind of question has the Ombuds received so far within this year that it's been up and running? Well, I tell you, I have received any kind of question. You would not believe it. I get a lot of questions of what is prohibited or allowed on medications and treatments and supplements. And then you can basically try to give a general reply and also direct to maybe the sport federation or the National Anti-Doping Organization for further issues. I also get a lot of questions on how can I use this medication and still do sport at top level. So basically how to apply for a TUE. Am I a national or international level athlete? These things are very important in this context. And of course, whereabouts questions before failure, at an early stage of a first failure, or at the late stage after 3 failures. Whereabouts questions remains really a headache for athletes. But most importantly, and where I believe I can provide you with most guidance, is in relation to if you receive a notification letter. So athletes would ask me, I have received a notification letter of an anti-doping rule violation. What should I do next? What are my options? What's the next step? What do I need to prove? Do I need to get a lawyer, etc.? And then athletes contact me and say, I have received a decision in my case. I'm not exactly satisfied with the outcome. Can I appeal this decision? And should I appeal decisions? Do I have any kind of success rate in this appeal? And how much would that cost me? Can I afford this appeal? So these are the questions that are most commonly coming into the Ombuds. And the last but not least that I put on this slide is where athletes believe that there has been a breach of their rights and what we can do about that. For me, it's important that the due process is through every anti-doping organization from the start to the end. And hopefully with this role, we can help improve the system globally. So how can the athletes then reach out to the Ombuds? I don't know how many of you that have seen anything online about the Ombuds or in a newsletter or even visited the website, but it's fairly easy. I leave this for you to scan the QR code that will lead you to the website. On the website, you have a secure inbox where you can write to the Ombuds and will be replied through there. You can also contact the Ombuds directly on the email address. Either way, the Ombuds will try to reply as soon as possible. So what happens then when you have contacted the Ombuds? As I mentioned, try to reply as soon as possible. Initially, I would then reply on the secure platform or by email, depending on where it came in. Then the process starts. I might ask you for further information and questions. Questions related to your case for evaluation of the situation, such as asking you to share notification letters, decisions, or other important documentation in your situation. After that, I would like to schedule a call with you or a video call to discuss the situation. I might contact the National Anti-Doping Organization or the anti-doping organization involved in the case, or the International Federation or National Federation, to try to see their point of view and see where they are standing on the case. And I might seek guidance from other experts who are specialists in the domain. Let's say it's a very tricky scientific case, or it is a very tricky legal case. I might seek guidance for other experts. But most importantly here is to remember, I can only do all this with your consent. So my first thing would be, I will ask you, do you agree to share the notification letter with me? And remember here again, the use of the Ombuds is entirely voluntary. And I try to keep up to date with the incoming issues and handle them as soon as possible. And it's only a part-time job and the inquiries are many. So I hope we will be many, many more so we can have another staff to work with us on this very important project. But within this process, I want to highlight once again that I'm not being you don't have to be afraid of contacting me. We will have a very open discussion. You can be completely honest about your situation and there's no retaliation. And I will try to explain the next steps or explain what is expected for you. And then we can come to some kind of conclusion. I will never take any decision for you. It is your decision, purely your decision on how you want to proceed on your case. But it is my duty to assure that you are well informed so you can take a good decision on how to proceed. And what kind of feedback have so far I received from athletes? Well, you have everything, of course. I think your input changed the outcome of my case. Thank you so much. I feel helpless in this process, and that you are supporting me in this difficult time has been very important to me. Even if the outcome of my case will not change, it was helpful to have someone to talk to. But I also had people who said, this was absolutely useless and waste of my time, and you could not give me any helpful answer. Of course, you will have all kinds of replies and feedbacks from athletes depending on the situation. Please remember, I can rarely change the outcome of a case because that is not within my authority. However, I hope that you feel that the help led to something that could be useful for your situation. So where are we going from here? Well, the aim is, of course, to assist and guide athletes. That is the key. And we need to assure that athletes' rights are upheld in all part of the anti-doping proceedings. And given the complexity of the anti-doping system, we need to fill that gap between the athlete and the anti-doping organizations. So we need to ensure that every athlete has access to assistance, and also ensure that this ombuds becomes a permanent office for the future. And we need to ensure and create local and regional ombuds functions where the national language can be spoken. And we also need to ensure that athlete engagement is high. So that's where I need your help to promote and spread the word of this very important office. In relation to the national anti-doping organizations, what can you do to support your athletes in this process and the Ombuds office as such? Well, the national anti-doping organizations, or all the anti-doping organizations, they have a bit of a particular role because they're acting as prosecutors against the athletes. So it is not so strange that athletes sometimes feel that this is not the accurate forum to contact their anti-doping organization. But however, I believe it's very important for the anti-doping organizations to take the first step in helping the athletes in the process, so the athletes don't feel alone. I have seen many situations where once there is some kind of issue, the anti-doping organization just said, now you're on your own, athlete. You need to deal with this on your own. And that makes the athletes feel excluded. And on top of that, the athlete might as well be suspended from the sport, which makes it very complicated, being completely outside of the normal sphere where the athlete is acting. At competition, in training centers, in a group with trainers, etc. So this might make the athlete feel very alone. So you need to ensure you have a first step in place, helping the athlete to just navigate a bit within this system. So my first recommendation for the ADOs would be to ensure that the athletes are aware of the Ombuds office. For example, include the contact details in your notification letter or on your website. But of course, we also need to work proactively and educate within this very important topic. Another issue that is coming to the surface in my office here is that the legal ed athletes are having in the current situation is quite limited, depending on your country. So if the anti-doping organizations have possibility to create legal ed programs, it could be pro bono lawyers that help out in the initial stage, or it could be some kind of financial support for the athletes to have for each situation. That would be an amazing step to improve the system. And of course, if you have the possibility and the financial and human resources, create local ombuds. The global ombuds is not there to hinder any local ombuds being put in place. It's rather there to encourage such initiatives. So to summarize this very short seminar about the Athlete Anti-Doping Ombuds, I would like to say it's quite simple. It's about building relationships and trust with athletes. It's about building cooperation with anti-doping organizations, international federations, national federations, and anti-doping community at big. And it's about improving systems and the due process to ensure fair application of athletes' rights. And it's to fill the gap between athletes and the anti-doping organizations. And lastly, really assure athletes' rights and be there for athletes. So thank you very much for listening to this webinar. I'm now willing and very thankful for all your questions coming in, and I hope we can have a great discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you, Gabby. Before we move on to the question period, again, I just wanted to remind everyone, as I did at the outset, that this video is being recorded. It will be posted on WADA's YouTube channel afterwards, and we will make sure that any private information is removed, blurred, if we see any participants' faces. But if you do feel comfortable asking questions and raising your hand, please do so, and we will be watching the chat. So I do see a few hands already raised, so I will do my best to go in order and pronounce your name as best as possible. And when I do, I will activate your microphone and will invite you to ask your question. So the first question I see here is from Vasily. Vasily, I will be activating your microphone. So I think the floor is yours. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. Vasily? Otherwise, we will maybe go to the next person. We have Ronan. Ronan, I will be activating your microphone. So please unmute yourself and ask your question, and let's see if that works.
Hello.
All right, we can hear you, Ronan. Please go ahead.
I don't have a question. It's just I say hello in the beginning of the uh, webinar. I
Oh,
just say thank you for the information.
perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Then I will go down to the next person. We have Bonias Cristo. I will activate your microphone. If you have a question, please unmute yourself and the floor is yours. Bonias? While we wait, then perhaps for those who have their hands raised, maybe I will encourage you, if you do have a question, please leave your hand raised. Otherwise, you can remove or lower your hand. And in the meantime, I will go to the chat and the Q&A section to see if we have some written questions here. Let's see. I think this, Anna, please clarify the legal status of the ombuds. At whose expense, his or hers, free of charge, is the work provided? What is the legal framework of the ombuds?
Thank you for that question. Well, I suppose this person is talking about the charges of the athletes. So for the athletes, there is no charge at all. It is completely cost-free, and you can have, I wouldn't say as many hours as you want, but as many hours as SEED need for your situation. Sometimes it's obviously a very easy question. It will be 1 hour, and sometimes it might be 20 hours. So it is completely cost-free for the athletes, and that's the one important things in this project, to have a free access of legal advice in your situation. I hope that replied to your question.
Thank you, Anna. I will go to the next question that we have in the chat. Would you recommend that we create a more specific tie between anti-doping and athlete awareness?
Is that athlete awareness as in awareness about anti-doping? I interpret it that way. I would say, obviously, awareness is key to be aware what's happening in your situation and in the anti-doping system at large. And unfortunately, I can see quite often the lack of awareness of the rules and lack of education of the rules, and therefore the athletes ends up in situations where they would necessarily not have been if they had been aware and educated about the situation. I don't know if that replied to your question, but I definitely see a link between awareness and the athletes anti-doping ombuds, yes.
Thank you. And I think the person will also ask the question verbally. So I'll go back to the hands that are raised. I've seen a few changes. So let's see how that goes. So we have Jeff with a question. Jeff, I will activate your microphone. Just give it 1 second and then please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. This is very interesting. I should say at the outset, I'm not I am an athlete, but I'm quite old now. I'm 73 nearly, but my main area is maybe foolishly I've decided to go back to university, and I'm researching duty of care and welfare for athletes. And one of the key issues, and I apologize for using the word because it appears in many reports, is the role of a sport ombudsman. I'll call it a sport ombudsperson. And the first question, well, I would love to make contact with you about this research because I don't want to take everyone's time. So if that was okay, I would maybe make contact with you, Anna. One of the issues that I'm encountering is certainly in the UK, there's a separation between what I call elite athletes who are funded and elite athletes who are not funded. So one of the first questions I would ask is, are non-funded athletes covered by your program? Because what I see is there are many support mechanisms, maybe not perfect, for elite athletes by which I mean funded. They tend to be Olympic sports, but nothing, and I mean nothing, for non-funded athletes. So that is one of my real concerns. And just one final point is, my understanding of an ombuds is they have a role in investigation. And it would seem to me that your role is a combination between a mediator, advisor, and maybe elements of an ombuds. I'm really sorry that I've taken so much time, but I would welcome an opportunity of speaking to you. And one of my colleagues from ITF Taekwondo, I noticed, asked the question. I will be making contact with him because he's on the athletes committee to seek his views as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I can reply just quickly, just as a general reply to your questions. The first one, you're still from UK, which have, I would say you have a great system for elite athletes in terms of support for your athletes. And the majority of the world are, as you say, for the non-funded athletes. That's the reality of the rest of the world. So you're still in the UK quite lucky to have that function for elite athletes. As I mentioned in my presentation, any athlete that is bound by the World Anti-Doping Code has access to these services. So it's not depending on your level of athlete or your level in your sport. It's rather whether you're bound by these rules or not. So that's the reply to your first question. To the second question, of course, investigation is a tricky question, but if you in your research you can compare it with the ombuds function that you have within the company. So that's a similar investigations. I do, of course, investigate every case as such to give advice, but I don't publish this investigation or go forward with this investigation as in the meaning of a true investigation. But we can discuss that further. So thank you for your interesting questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Anna. We now have a question from Hong. Hong, I will activate your microphone so you can unmute yourself and please ask your question. We'll give a few seconds, otherwise I will go to the next question. Let's go to the next hand that is raised. Kostas, Kostas, I am activating your microphone. Please unmute yourself, and the floor is yours to ask your question. Two more seconds. I will go to the next hand raise, and then we will go back to the chat as I see there are a few written questions. All right, then we have Dr. Hashim. I am activating your microphone. It is now activated. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. All right, then I will go to the chat then. We do have a few questions. Let's go here. How can the Ombuds assist in cases of TUEs for medical conditions?
Thank you for that question. I would say that question is quite large. So obviously, if I receive questions about TUEs, I want to assure that the athletes is, for example, if they're putting in an application to have a TUE, to assure that they are putting in the correct information and the correct arguments for such a TUE. Let's say it might be a proactive TUE going forward, or it might be a retroactive TUE after, for example, an emergency treatment, or after a positive test where you have the right to apply retroactively depending on your level of athlete. So I would try to assure that the athlete is aware of the requirements that needs to be fulfilled, and then I always recommend the athlete to go together to do it together with their medical doctor. So there is no, I'm not a scientist, so I can guide on anything in relation to science. However, I can see what requirements that needs to be done in order for it to be fulfilled, and try to have the athletes having a complete case file submitting its application.
Thank you, Anna. And I see that in the chat we have a few questions that a few people that are asking how to unmute themselves. So you should see the microphone at the top of your screen, and then you would need to click on it to unmute. So I will maybe quickly go back to the individuals that had their hands raised just to see if that is working for them. So Hong, I will say again, your microphone has been activated. If you are able to unmute yourself, the floor is yours. Otherwise, I will go back to the chat. All right, then let's go back to the chat. And apologies if a few people are having difficulties unmuting themselves. Please feel free to write your question in the chat, and we will go to those questions. Let me just go back up here. Just give me 1 second. So we have a question around the workload, Anna. What is the workload that you're dealing with at this point? I'm assuming maybe the number of questions, queries from different countries, perhaps.
Yeah. So it's always hard to judge a caseload because it varies very much. Sometimes you have very simple questions which only takes a few minutes to reply to, and sometimes you have very complex issues that you need to read decisions, case laws, and rules, and different federations rules, different countries rules to compare the situation. So it really is difficult to evaluate one particular case. We set up the website in September last year, and until today, I believe in total there's been about 100 inquiries through this website. And I would say when you work in an international federation, let's say you might have half of that in a year. So the caseload it is not massive at the moment, but the inquiries are quite complex sometimes. So I think with more awareness, obviously the caseload will go up massively. So that's what I'm hoping for all of you to spread the word to contact the ombuds if need be. And in relation to numbers, what is interesting when you look at the statistics is that you might think it is a European project or American project or whatever. What you can see is people from all over the world. So I think up to date, it's been about 45 different countries contacting the ombuds. And in this tool, there is also quite a good translation tool. So you can contact the ombuds in your language. There will be a translation sent to the ombuds, and then when the ombuds writes back, it will come to you in your language. So it's also giving opportunities for people who don't necessarily speak French or English or Spanish to contact in their own language and to have that translation done within the system, which is great. I don't know if that answered your question.
Great, thank you. I mean, this was from the chat. If we want clarifications, please feel free to continue to add in the chat or raise your hand. I will go to another question from the chat. Anna, you spoke about kind of growing the ombuds community. So we have someone that says they like the idea of having ombuds locally or across various countries. The question is there a recommended approach you have in mind for these to be developed and implemented?
Yes, so at this very moment now, we are investigating and making trying to map out how many countries that actually do have an ombuds function within their country or within their sport, and to see how many that have access to that. So when that mapping is done, we will evaluate how many there are and see how we can cooperate with these going forward. Of course, every organization is different, and I understand your question as how are the best steps to put in place a local ombuds role. Just for information going forward, we're trying to also put together some kind of guiding principles that could be used as a start for organizations that would like to set up this office. It is not unusual as well in countries to have an ombuds that covers not only anti-doping, but mental health, safeguarding, and other issues that are important within sport. And it's not a bad idea maybe to combine these. So this will follow in the coming, I would say, 6 months that we put this in place. And also remember that every organization is different. Some sit within their national anti-doping organization within the government, some sit outside the government, some are just a foundation in the country. So all the structures are very different. So depending on the structure on how the organization sits, there might be some different steps to take in order to assure the principles of an ombuds office, independency, confidentiality, impartiality, and neutrality can be kept for that purpose.
All right, thank you again, Anna, and thank you everyone for your question. I am conscious of the time. We have a few more minutes here, so I will look at what we have in the chat, and maybe we can go with 1 or 2 more questions. So if you have very pressing questions, please feel free to add them. Otherwise, if we don't have time to get to your question, we'll make sure to provide a written answer. Anna, how many countries have so far a local ombuds office?
Well, this I wish I knew. When I started the project last year, I think we came to the conclusion 7 countries. And now I don't know, over this 6 months that has passed since then that we're putting in place this mapping out of the ombuds offices. It will be published at some point once we publish the report for next year. So at the moment, I cannot really reply completely honestly to it, but let's put it like this. Given how many countries there are in the world, not many, unfortunately.
Great, thank you. But it is something we will be working on, and Anna will be working on as you mentioned in the presentation. So I think that's going to be good news ahead. We have a question that's saying, is the ombuds for athletes of all ages? I mean, I think, Anna, the answer would be yes.
Absolutely. And we have to think about all different kind of sports. In some sports you peak when you're 15, whereas in other sports you might peak when you're 59, like in equestrian, with a gold medalist in the equestrian sport, which he was 59 at the time. So it's never too late. And there's a lot of actually veterans contacting me in cycling, running, trail running, all these triathlon, where you can keep on your body going until you're at least 75, am I understanding. So all ages welcome.
Great, thank you. Let me just do one last check here. So in the chat, we have a few questions around the best way to reach you, the resources that are available. So maybe before we close, maybe I would just ask you if you can put back, Anna, your slide with the QR code and the website, so maybe people can scan the QR code or take a picture, and then we will, I think on that, conclude the webinar today.
Absolutely. Can you see something now?
Yes, great, thank you. So as I said before we close out the webinar, if people want to reach out to Anna, please do so. Scan the QR code or take a picture of the website, the email, and we certainly encourage you and invite you to reach out with any questions that you might have. And on that, really, I really wanted to thank you for joining us today. We had close to 250 participants on this webinar, so I think it demonstrates the interest in this topic. So thank you everyone for your participation. Thank you, Anna, for the great presentation. Thank you, Gabby, for participating in your wonderful introductory notes. Much appreciated. And to all of you and to anyone who is on the road to Paris, really, we wish you all the best. Again, we thank you for joining us, and I will say until next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.